Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I am so excited to introduce my friend Ray today. I'm going to get you to say your first full and last name. I say it Raechelle Embrey, but is that right?
It's Raechelle Embrey, but
Okay.
pretty much everybody just calls me Ray.
Yeah, and I just love calling you Ray. I'm like my friend Ray, Radiant Vibes on Instagram. I met Ray in the Natalie Wallstein, who's the Soulshine Astrology podcast. She had a mastermind called the Cosmic Boss Babes Mastermind. And me and Ray were partnered in a quad of a mini mastermind. So we really got to know each other really well over this past year. I mean, all four of us in this group, we fell in love and we all still keep in touch. And so I was really excited to have Ray on the podcast today to talk about one aspect that she has in her spiritual practice, which is around animal communication. This is something that I have so many questions about. But before we get in, I just want to welcome you, Ray. If you could just say hi to the audience, let us know who you are, a little bit about you, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been really excited about this all week. So I am I do a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
but animal communicator, intuitive. I also do energy healing, and I am a soul astrologer, and I do soul alignment for people and animals, all beings, essentially. So yeah.
I love it. And I've had two sessions with you. My second one's today, and the first one was a beautiful session. I really enjoy your work, and I will get a pet communication reading with you for sure. I've just been waiting for my own grief to kind of like run its
Yeah.
course before I do that, as you know, about my bender. And
Yeah.
so my audience has been following the story of that for a couple of months now, and I had a whole podcast episode on grief and like losing him and the signs from animals give you from the afterlife. And I did have an experience when he was still alive with a well-known pet communicator. It wasn't the most positive experience for me, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. It was kind of lacking evidence and comfort, I suppose I would say. And that's not to poo poo on her, because I know as a reader, some readings are awesome, other readings are not. It's an energetic match between you and the client and all that stuff. So definitely not going to poo poo on her craft. It was just what it was. So I was
Yeah.
excited to have you on because I trust you wholeheartedly. I know how gifted you are. I've had sessions with you. So I just wanted to ask you the big questions that I had when it came to pet communication. But let's start with like how you got into it. Like what, because I know you train dogs, and we actually know some
Yeah.
common people really weird ways through
Yeah.
dogs.
Totally random, but yeah.
Totally random. But how did you first find this gift to communicate with animals?
I guess it's something it was always a part of me. I've always been very connected to animals, all animals. I've actually worked a lot with horses, training horses off of the track. I've worked a lot with behavior and aggressive animals. And I've just, since a little girl, just had an affinity and connection with animals, and was taking care of them. Even as a kid, I took care of all the pets, made sure they were walked, and just kind of knew what they needed. And um, about, I guess it was about like 12 years ago, I started getting into competitive performance dog sports. And I quickly excelled in that. And I was like, this is kind of crazy. I mean, really, accomplishing some pretty awesome accolades in a quick amount of time. That was, and I started working with an animal communicator myself. And actually, she is the one that was like, you totally do this, and you're already doing this. This is why that's why you're so good at like what you're doing, and like being able to communicate what's expected and what's needed, and also harnessing that connection that you need with animals. Because in my perspective, the performance stuff wasn't really about, getting the title or the ribbon per se. It was like, what can I do to harness the connection and harness like the best of this animal that I'm working with, right? And so I feel like that's a lot of what animal communication is. And so it was with her that she started taking me on, and I just quickly, it just kind of unraveled at that point. It was like, right, okay, I do this. This is really cool. And it's just taken off, from there. So.
I
Yeah.
love it. And so have you found people like employing you for this, like dog trainers, like in that industry?
Yeah. Actually, I work with a good amount of dogs in the show world, a conformation. agility. I work with dogs that do herding, horses, performance horses, and then just as much, just, our everyday companions, and, pretty much there's no limit. I've connected with birds and reptiles, and I work with rescue animals at farm sanctuaries. So there's like pigs and, cows and chickens and turkey. I mean, you name it. I've probably connected with it at this
I
point.
love it. That's so amazing. And so,
Yeah.
how does it work for you communication wise? Like, as a medium, we all kind of receive information from spirit very differently. Some of us see it, some of us hear it. I mean, all of us have a little bit of all of it, but for
Hmm.
me, it's mostly telepathic and like through feeling. So, like, how do
Yeah.
you receive the information from the animal?
I think it's quite similar, honestly. It's telepathic. And I also have a gift of being able to read energy. So I can tune in. So even if an animal is more reserved and doesn't really want to communicate out, I can tune into their body and feel their energy. And then that's sort of why I combine it with the energy healing, because then I'll ask my guides or their guides to come through and start to help balance whatever that is being felt. And then they open up, right? So it's not like, it's not, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily having this like dialogue, right? It's not this necessarily like this back and forth conversation. It's very quick, sort of like images and pictures and downloads just coming through. It's very quick. I mean, it's just like, and you just got to kind of share as soon as it comes through. So I think it's a lot more feeling and sort of like receiving and reading the energy. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And is it then the owner that validates the information that comes through?
So, yeah, I mean, I try to give some points of validation just to help people feel comfortable, but primarily I'm speaking on behalf of the animals. So there's not
Mm.
necessarily, unless I'm communicating with an animal in spirit, like I don't really look to this as though I need to give a ton of validation. I might give, like, information and towards their insight towards their personality and like who they were, so that it
Mm.
kind of resonates. And I want to make sure I'm on the right track too, right?
Yes.
But with animal communication, it's really a conduit. Like I'm a channel to speak on behalf of the animal. So I'm not really necessarily there to get the validation from the people. It's to build that like channel between the person and the animal, so that there can be a greater connection and understanding, so that maybe what one person might need to train that specific animal, or what they need to feel connected, is very different than if that animal was with another one. So my whole goal in this is just to speak on behalf of what the animal's feeling, what they need, what would make them feel safe, and then also try to help the animal understand like how their person is also in this picture too, right? Like there's two parts here. So does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and you just had like a mic drop moment for me, because I mean I can only compare it to mediumship because I haven't had an animal communication experience other than the signs Bender has left me. But
Yeah.
this is the essence of what mediumship is, but we kind of lose the plot sometimes because there's such a hyper focus on the evidence. And so
Yeah.
we almost like lose the essence of what the communication is about and what our mediumship role is because of the evidence. And it's almost like we block the flow of energy because we need that validation. I don't think we do. I think that's just kind of like where development is at and like the standards of it and stuff like that. So what you said is actually like the essence of what mediumship is and should be, but we, because of the popularity of it, we really do get stuck on the evidence. And if there's something that
Yeah.
doesn't come, that's not validated, we can lose our power, we fall out of the link, and it's not like this pure kind of like communication, right? So I love your
Yeah.
approach to it. Please never change that.
Yeah, I feel like it's really important to remember for anybody that's diving into this, is like you might receive a lot of information that, somebody may not be able to validate, but share what you receive, because it may not click that moment. But I've had things happen where people write me a year later and they're like, you were so right. And I just wanted to share this with you and let you know that, it made no sense at the time, but
Mhm.
now, boom, I totally get it. And so it's kind of like we are essentially in this, we are channel. That's what we're doing. We're a channel to, you know move the information out. But it is unfortunate. I mean, we do have to look at some evidence, because there's unfortunately a lot of people doing this type of work that abuse it, and they're not really aligned authentically with the gift of this. And I feel like there is a high level of responsibility that comes with anybody that has these gifts or develops these. We are working with people's energy, even if it's in the way of mediumship, no matter what. So like we can really do damage if we aren't in a high sort of etiquette with that, right? So
Definitely, because honestly, from my experience of losing a pet, like I've lost some people in my life, but nothing has compared to the grief of like losing a pet. So the connection is just so, there's just a different connection between humans and animals. I don't know what it is.
mhm,
I mean, I tell my husband, he was like, I think it's because they're so pure, like they're
they
so
are,
innocent. They are just
yeah.
like walking love.
Yeah, it's the unconditional love aspect. And I feel like that's sort of what it is like when with people, we can only be so like there, we really don't in our human capacity. It's sort of difficult to truly love unconditionally, right? We can love very deeply, we can experience that, but the love from an animal is just so unconditional, right? Like it doesn't matter. They can see you at their worst. They can, I mean, and think about it with the case of like animals that are severely abused, they would still look to that abuser as loyal, like you are my caregiver. And that is still some sort of essence of safety because like they are unconditional, right? It's just a very pure, like you said, just sort of like magical connection. And when you start diving into the world of animal communication and like working with the energy healing aspect around that, the connections become so much more like soul aligned. Like they really truly, it's like you're sort of like opening up that connection through the soul to really come through the heart center and sort of like meet in this like I don't know, it's just kind of a really cool energetic circle, and you can always tell when animals are really understood and really seen. There's a different energy that they put out in their environment, even in photographs. Like as soon as I get them, I'm like, yeah, I can just definitely tell like when somebody sees that essence in their animal, right? But eventually when people, even if they don't necessarily initially when they work with me, it's like eventually they just get hooked and they keep coming back because it's just so neat how everything opens up between the human and the animal, and how much healing ends up happening out of it. So.
I love that. And I just love this whole conversation because I receive so many messages. Like when I'm going to talk about the passing of animals and stuff here, because what you do is mediumship to me. Like I consider animal communication, especially when we're dealing with, departed pets, like that is definitely a form of mediumship without a doubt, in
Mhm.
my opinion, right? Three-way link, right? Pass along evidence that life continues, that there's more than just this experience without a doubt. But when we lose a pet, it kind of falls under this category of disfranchised grief, right? It's not
Yeah.
commonly like accepted by society, which
Yeah.
is fascinating to me because I don't know anybody who has a pet who doesn't have like this insane bond with them. But in the same breath, I met with a friend for a cup of tea a couple months ago, and she's like, yeah, and I lost my cat and I couldn't work for a month. And I remember even then, like having Bender and he was sick, I was like, I didn't understand until I actually went through the process itself. So you talking about the unconditional love, the bond that we have with animals, like there's nothing quite like it. And when we lose it, it's very, very hard. So how do you handle then clients who come to you for the pet communication after they pass? Because that kind of grief, I imagine, would be hard to almost like read through for me.
Yeah, it's, you know, I feel like they're my favorite sessions, honestly, to do is that. And I know this might sound kind of, odd too, but also assisting animals crossing over. And so I do quite a bit, sometimes more at times, depending on how this universe is working. I mean, there can be more weeks where there's more transitioning, just the veil is thinner and it just opens up. But I feel like with the animal and spirit, they're so healing. And when you connect with that energy and you can hold it and hold space for that vulnerability for somebody to just kind of, it's almost like, it's this, to me, I mean, I'm in this like sort of huge vast space and here is all this here. And then it's like the person and they're vulnerable, like just completely ready to receive that connection from the animal, but so uncertain. And as soon as the information starts flowing, it's like, a lot of people tears start flowing through the sessions. They're really taken back, but afterwards it's like such a sense of healing that comes through. And I really feel that the animals in spirit are almost working through the heart center and the sacral and to help clear out the grief. to help open it up so that it can move through the body. Because the number one thing that I hear after these sessions is just that there's such a huge relief, and they feel just a sense of peace, and like they're connecting with their animal for the first time, and that they're getting sort of, and a lot of the times people are already receiving connection and messages, but then they're getting the validation that they are, right? Like they're, and I think that's so important for people to know, like you are always, like it's in the heart, you know, like your hearts are soul entwined, you know, that's not going away. But so I feel like that's sort of one of the biggest things, is like there's sort of this it really is like a healing energy that comes through the body, and it opens our hearts back up, right? And energy can move again. So it's kind
And
of,
those are some of my favorite mediumship sessions that we had. Not so much like what was said and what was brought through. It was like the fact that we're both crying, and like we both feel the presence of the spirit, and there is, you can't have the spirit come that close and not be changed and healed by it, right?
yeah,
And now I get to
yeah,
come that close. I love that. So
yeah.
a technical question I have, because this is one of the biggest questions like I was thinking about after Bender passed, and I had some magical experiences with him a few days after he passed. And I remember thinking, like, there must be a way to bring through evidence of a pet, right? Like in mediumship, we talk about, you know, this was your grandfather, and like he smoked and he had glasses and he passed of a heart attack, and you know, he saw the trip to Disneyland. Like there's like this certain amount of evidence that comes through that gives the sitter some sort of validation, like, yeah, she is connected with grandpa, right? So like, what does that look like for a pet? Because I mean, that would be a little bit harder, I would imagine, but
So
maybe I'm wrong.
no, it's pretty similar actually, because I'm just thinking about some, because I've had a lot this week, so I'm thinking recent, you know, um, they share a lot. They share a lot of the, like what's happening with me, and I'll kind of see like what, for example, just the other day, I mean, one animal was showing me almost like the person standing with their feet in the water, and I was like, "Are you getting ready to go on a trip, like on a vacation by the beach?" And she's like, "Yeah, like in 5 days." And so it's like, you know, and it's the animal saying, you know, "I'm going to be there, and I'll be connecting with you," and it's almost like this. So there is a lot of, they share these
Mhm.
memories, right? I had an animal that was ready to transition, and the owner had just wanted that validation, like, are they really? I feel like it is, and wanting that connection. And I mean, immediately she came through, and she's so the spirit will start to sort of slowly fade out the closer that to the last days, right? And she was, you know, I could feel this fading, and that's sort of like how I can tell when they're ready to transition or getting really close. And she shared this really beautiful lake with me, and I could see these sort of pine trees in the background. It was very specific, you know. And I said, do you go sit with her at a lake? Is there a lake near your home that you guys frequently go to? And he said, yeah, all the time. And so she was showing me, she couldn't walk, and so she was showing me going over, him taking the blanket and sitting on this blanket for the afternoon as they shared their last moments together. And I think those things are really important for people to connect with, because those are cherished moments, right? They'll share often like favorite things that they did in their lifetime, right? They'll share with me if an animal has come through to help a person really grow from, you know, maybe like a young adult, you know, a teen, all the way through adult years. They'll actually show me that person as a younger version of themselves and all of the growth. And, you know, so it's like, and it'll also feel like a feeling, right? So I'll get that purpose, like, this animal really helped you, you know, it was like a father figure, almost like the support system for you as you grew into your adulthood, you know. So it's very similar in that way. I think, you know, as you explained it, I was thinking, yeah, that is quite similar.
It is. Well, and that's what I was kind of hoping, because the experience that I had wasn't, yeah, it was, I'll just give you kind of an example. Like she just kept talking about the curtains in the room. I'm like, I don't have any curtains in the house, right? But she wouldn't let it go for like 15 minutes, and it was only half an hour session. So like nothing got said after that. And I was like, can we let the curtains go? Like, you know, like, and so I just didn't get very much out of it, to be honest with
Yeah,
you, right? And I could tell, like, it was
yeah,
much like mediumship. We try for the evidence so much, and it's just like, I just want to hear a message. Is my cat okay? And this is before he passed,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
One question I want to ask you, and this is very personal, and I know a lot of listeners would want to know the same thing. So I had to make the decision to put Bender down. I actually tried to have him put down a week before so he didn't have to suffer, but they wouldn't. And so it was like very traumatic for me watching like the decline. And I know a lot of people who've come to me, I'm not a pet communicator. I've always been a little bit nervous connecting with animals. So I hope to do some mentorship with you on this because I would like to do more of it because I know the impact that it could have. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's the question I hear a lot. Are they mad at me for having to put them down? And so like, what do you say about that? Like, what do you say to somebody who has that question? Do animals, are they upset that you had to make that decision? Are they forgiving? Like, what goes on in that situation?
Yeah, this is a really important one. And I feel one of the, I mean, it's truly the hardest decision, right? Like we have all this time together. The animals are really comfortable. Like some initially, as they're getting, if they're not really close, they may have more anxiety around transition, but the closer that it gets, I often see other animals, people, relatives, you know, there sort of like coaching them, almost guiding them, right? And they'll say to me, and I learned so much from this. I'm always amazed sometimes what they share with me, because I'll just, when you think you've seen what you've seen, you know, it's like there's another element, right? And like, wow, that's happening, you know. So as it gets closer, they often are very aware that their body is declining, and they're so in the moment, you know, they're not in the how we are, where, you know, they look back and it's these regrets, and they come to a very high sense of peace with the transition most of the time. There are times where, like, you know, something tragic happens, and it's, you know, so that there's, but in the case of your example with Bender, you know, um, they become pretty aware of it. And it's almost like a lot of the times they feel it's a gift, right? And that a lot of animals actually don't want to be suffering ongoing like that, you know. um and they share that with me a lot. You know, sometimes I'll get a very clear message, like they're going to go at home, you're not even going to have to do this, and that works out. You know, if it works out beautifully and they're not suffering for an ongoing amount of time, that is truly like the most beautiful way to go, right? But it doesn't always work like that. And so most animals really don't want to be suffering. They don't want to be in chronic pain, and they do look at it like a gift. And once you explain to them too, like you're just going to go into a sleep, and they'll have specific requests around that time as well. And I would say the main request is that their owners be with them.
Mm,
You know, they really do not want to be alone. You know, that's one of the most important requests that they have, because it is a little scary. You know, they're still scared, like they're
yeah.
leaving their body, right? But there's a sense of peace and comfort around that. So, and what I end up doing to help with that is call in, you know, I'm not a huge connector with angels, but the angels are really good at coming through with this process and supporting the house, the animal, the people, and then guides, and just create like a nice healing around it. And almost everybody, I don't think I've ever had anybody say to me that it wasn't the most peaceful transition that they've ever experienced, you know, which is really nice. And just to have that element at that such painful time, you know. But
Mm.
yeah, so I think they're really grateful, to be honest with you. It's almost like some have even said to me, it's a gift. You're giving me a gift. You're giving me the gift of like not suffering, you know?
I
But they're
love
still
that.
sad. Yeah, they're still sad to leave their owners. They're still sad to leave life, you know? But a lot of the times it's also because it's time for them to assist us in new ways, you know, like our souls have worked out everything that they need to work out together, so they can be more helpful on the other side, you know,
Mhm.
perhaps.
They
Sometimes that,
have.
yeah, I hope that I'm sure you felt this. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I
sure you
mean, I can't even tell you how many specific, almost comical signs. Even my husband's been witness to all of them, and he does not a believer in any of this. He was like, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "I know."
That's amazing.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"This is the power, like, of the love that we had together." And Bender brought me Luna. Like, you know, this is COVID. There's no puppies to be had during COVID, right? Like, all the lab breeders were booked up for 3 years for breeding, and the rescue centers are like, we never get labs, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just
No.
said to
Yeah.
Bender on a Friday, I said, Bender, I'm a bit lonely. Like I could really use like the love of a pet. Like, can you help line us with a black lab? And I had the black lab by Tuesday in my house, right?
Oh,
This was a
they're
Friday.
so good at helping us connect with like new partners to come in,
Yeah.
these new relationships, to come in. One of the number one things that they'll always say to me, I kind of, it's almost, in fact, at just about every session, unless that particular animal is looking to incarnate quite quickly. Right. But they'll say, ask me, I'll guide you to the right animal. I'll bring the right soul to you,
And
and
Luna is just like Bender. Like my husband thinks it's weird. Like she has like a heart-shaped black nostril. She has a little white tuft of hair on her chest, exactly the same. She does the same thing with the back door. Just leave the door open. Like it's -2 degrees
right.
right now. She's like, just leave. I just want out. I want in. I want out. I want in. Sleeps with me the exact same that Bender did. Curls up behind me on my bed right here when I'm doing my sessions. Like
Oh,
literally, like though Luna was obviously born before Bender passed, I don't know where I
right.
stand with pet reincarnation either. So that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. Like
Yeah.
the philosophy that I've heard and read, I can't validate. I have no evidence to
Yeah.
prove it right. But one of the philosophies is that animals don't reincarnate. Like they just incarnate that once for the one owner. They're the first to greet you when you go home. And I've asked Bender to be the first one to greet me when I go home. I'm like, you better be the first in line, buddy. Like, because I love him so much. But like, where do you stand with that?
It's such a diverse and sort of, I don't know, there's a lot of different perspectives on that, but I can only speak from what I've experienced in
Yeah.
that. Okay. So, I don't think that they incarnate as often as we would like them to. And I'm, people want them to come back right away, but we have a whole soul family up here, that we're meant to experience and learn with, right, and grow with. So whether it's an animal or the people in our soul tribe, there's lots of connections and lots of things, that we're meant to work through with many different beings, right? And so, it's I've seen it where I can feel that there is a very old soul connection, but I would say primarily the connection comes from past lives. So
Mhm.
it's not necessarily always in this lifetime. That said, I will sometimes connect with an animal that I am so clear I get the very image of who they were in that person's past. And when I say, did you have a dog that looked like this, or a cat that looked like this, or they'll be like, yeah, that was my dog when I was a teenager with a kid, or yeah. And I mean, they'll send a picture and I'm like, that's it. That's totally they know exactly what I'm talking about. Right. So it does happen. It just doesn't happen as often as I think we would like. And when
Mhm.
it does happen, there's still things to work out between the souls. Like there's still things to learn, that they have a purpose with you have a purpose with them,
Yeah.
and the other thing to keep in mind is like we want them to come back because we want them to be exactly what they were when they were with us, right? But when they come back, they're more often completely different. They are nothing like what they were. And people are always like, this is not what I was expecting. Well, of course not. It's a totally different body. It's a totally different vessel. It's a totally different experience, right? So, we might not always get exactly that perfect being, we might get something we weren't really prepared for. So.
No, I love that. I love that you even answer that because I mean, I've read that, but like I haven't seen evidence to prove it or disprove it. Like I haven't seen that come through in my readings or my sessions. So I was like, I
Yeah.
wonder. So while you're here, I'm like, hey, what
I,
about
you
this?
know, I don't know. It's not like I can say I have evidence. It's just something I feel, right? I do think it happens. I just don't think it happens a lot. Now, one thing with your Luna, you
Mhm.
said her name,
Yeah.
and Bender, what I do see often is some animals are very open channels to connect
Mhm.
with spirit. And so they can potentially be like, sort of like a receiver. And the animal and spirit can come through them, so you'll feel certain like essence, certain personality traits. You'll feel like, just sometimes you might look over and feel maybe through Luna almost wanting to say Bender,
Called her Bender a lot
and
of times.
yeah. So that is a prime example that I would say Bender is coming through, and they have this sort of agreement, and
Mhm.
that's giving you, a way to connect and really feel Bender, closely to you. I've personally experienced that with one of my dogs too. Again, it's not super common when it happens. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and I've blended with Bender's energy a few times. I don't do it all the time because I do cry every single time. And like,
Yeah.
it's been almost 3 months and like the grief is unbelievable. Like I have not
Yeah.
been the same person since I lost him. And though I will get back to it. I know I will. And I'm just a different person now.
Yeah.
Because my heart is torn open, right? And so like that's what they say grief is. It's learning to live with your heart ripped open.
Hmm.
And I feel that more than ever and I miss him. But anytime I blend with him, it's funny. I don't know if other people experience this, but the way that he appears to me looks the same but so different. It's like I can't describe how big he looks. Like I connect with angels, I connect with departed loved ones. Like I see, physically the appearances, but the way that Bender chooses to appear to me is like bigger than life. Like it's
Oh yeah. Yeah.
so big that like I don't know, it's like bigger than a house, right? It's like when I
Yeah.
see him, it's like so weird to put it into perspective.
Hmm.
And so it's fascinating. I guess for me, symbolically, I'm like, hey, he's bigger than life now. Right. He
Yeah.
suffered for a long time. Like he was sick for a long, long time. And
Right.
so,
Right. Yeah.
and we went the natural route treating him. So like, it was shocking. They were surprised. He lived about a year and a half longer than they expected.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so when he
Yeah.
comes to me, he looks so fluffy and he looks just monstrous. Like he just looks
Yeah.
huge to me. And I've never had a person or an angel come through looking that big. It's quite
Yeah.
fascinating for me.
Yeah, they do. They will come through very powerful presence, and they almost always, yeah, I would say, I'm going to say always come through at a time, and they're sharing like a time when they're like, when you're saying fluffy, or like they look vibrant, lustrous, usually a much younger age when they felt really good in their body. Sometimes they'll share themselves as like light form, so I don't necessarily see, that's not as common, but usually I see a younger version of themselves that's very big, very large energy. It's very, they have so much to share. I mean, a lot of the wealth of information that I've learned about animal communication, our connection with animals, has
Mhm.
really been through animals in spirit. And I try to share sometimes on my Instagram messages, but it's so hard to put this into words, right? Because it's and be able to share it without like the full message. It could get really lengthy, but, and that's sort of like how those sessions are for me, is I'm just in this like completely blank space. My eyes are closed and I am just literally just speaking anything I'm seeing, hearing, feeling. And I mean, before I know it, I mean, 30 minutes will be by and it's like, wow, that just happened. So that bigger than life energy, it really, it's like you're tapping into a completely different frequency, and it feels so good to be in too. It's like,
It is. There's something so powerful about animals. And I'll be honest with you, Bender was my first pet, right? Like, we had pets obviously when we were kids, but they weren't my pet. And we were so young. Like, yeah. Anyways, so Bender
yeah.
was like the first like pet I had. So Luna being my second. So I'm kind of curious if you feel like, can anyone do pet communication? Like, could anyone train up to be able to like communicate with the energy and be a channel for living and past animals?
This is, I think so. I think people can attune to it and they can certainly learn. I do feel that because I do work with people and mentor people with this. And what I found is some people are naturally more gifted than others. It doesn't, I think we all have the ability to attune to them to a certain capacity. I think animals in spirit are definitely a little bit more challenging. It's a different frequency.
Mm,
And connecting, one of the things that I'm really trying to work on is a animal communication course for each of us to just connect more with our pets at home, right? To sort of learn and feel and communicate more clearly with them. But when it comes to connecting with other people's animals, and it is, you're opening up a whole different world, and you're not only connecting with the animal's energy, you're connecting with the human's energy. And so my philosophy on this is really like, you have to be able to hold capacity for both, and you're doing a lot of tapping into a person's emotional body as well. And so it's like, you really have to be a person that can hold that space with a lot of grace, and with no judgment, with none of your personal preconception, none of your personal beliefs, around that, because everybody is so different. So I think that is the harder part, to step out. And also the other thing is to not interpret, to not put your own spin on it, to be right, just to feel like, oh, I did it, or to feel like you have to interpret, it's just deliver the message, get in, get out, and then not have any of that other judgment, because maybe you wouldn't do it that way. Maybe you wouldn't care for your animal that way. It doesn't matter. This is a connection between that animal and that person,
Yeah.
and it's theirs, so does that make sense?
100%. And that's like what I feel so much in reading. Some readings I've even had just mediumistically. It's like the most impactful ones for me is when I felt the message. It wasn't even what they said. It was like I felt it. Like I felt that
Yeah.
connection. And
In your
that does,
body, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like a very visceral experience. And so that to me is like, I remember watching Goop Labs when they're trying to debunk mediumship, and they said you can't give somebody a transcript of a mediumship reading and say this is actually a thing. It's a physical experience that you have, that three-way connection. So I imagine that being hyper like 10 times when it comes to like animal communication. Um,
yeah, for sure. Cause you're not just the animal's energy, you're the human, and then you have spirit too, because I'm also channel energy healing, right? So there's all these different parts, but I do think anybody can learn to a large degree, whether it's but to fine tune that skill, I do think is a unique gift that some people are really just amazing at, and they just get it, and it's pretty cool.
I love it. So just wondering what the most common thing is people ask you for when it comes to pet communication.
I would say, what do they need? What are their needs? How can I make them more happy? Are they happy? Some people even, do they love me? But I think by and far, the number one thing that comes through is, what do they need? I do work with a lot of sick animals, and I wished I could have connected with you and Bender towards the end, because the energy healing, so blending the energy healing and animal communication is really great, because you can actually take a lot of those ailments that senior animals or sick animals, like with cancer, and you can, by elevating the emotional body, you can help them experience less pain, right? You're increasing their energetic frequency to higher frequencies of being, and you can actually extend lives. I mean, I've had animals that were told, you have a month to live with cancer, and they've gotten 6 to 8 months, working with like chemotherapy too. So the guys will actually work with the energetics of the chemo to adjust it to like what that body needs, and then make it easier for the body to process the chemotherapy. There's no end, like with kidney failure and cats, get a lot of kidney failure. They've been able to completely reverse it. Right.
Mm.
Eventually the body will fade though, so but the whole point is to allow that being to have just a higher quality of living and life, to not be walking around experiencing chronic pain, even if they are in that, it's like giving the body a little bit of peace, right? The body may still go along its process,
Yeah.
but you can actually help. The animals are really good if they get into a high elevated emotional state of not feeling the pain, right? It's pretty awesome. It's really wild.
That is incredible. I absolutely love it. Like, I'm surprised you have time to do anything else, because I am just sure so many people would be like, talk to my pet. Like, I wish I knew about this kind of stuff earlier. And I know that when Bender was sick, it was just such a crazy time. Like, I
Yeah.
felt like we exhausted everything, to be honest, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like this crazy time. And yeah, with him, he had cancer for 2 years, and we decided not to do the chemo route.
Yeah.
And so like they were shocked. Like, your cat is like living off love right now,
Right.
because he was just like, yeah, I just didn't want to put him through all that, right? So interesting. Yeah, I do wish that we could have connected, but I love that you do this work. It's almost like doing end of life doula work too, right?
It is. And I was thinking about that the other day, because even helping the animals transition and helping the people, I mean, it's such a gift to be able to be there at such a difficult time. And, it really makes a very traumatic experience. It's so fascinating to see how, when that takes part, like I have somebody that connects with me pretty regularly, and their animal was transitioning last week, and she's sending me pictures through text of each of her animals. She has several, like many, and so each one was going and laying with that animal through the day, having their closure, and then she said that when her animal transitioned, and it was very peaceful in their yard, the vet came out, and all of her other animals were around. She said it was almost like the celebration of life. They all started like running around the yard and sort of having this, celebration for the life. And I think animals are just so good at understanding that, what is over on that other side is really an adventure. When they get to that point, there is sometimes, like I said earlier, there can be a lot of anxiety, just like people struggling with that. But, I don't know if you've been with people near end of life. A lot of the times they get to that sense of peace too. Like they're kind of like, yes, I'm ready. I've done what I can do. And there's this wave of peace that comes through the body
Yeah, it's
and
that
through the emotional
surrendering and
state.
letting go.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where the phenomenon is at end of life bedside. Like a lot of research has been done on this. That's where they see beautiful lights. Like I think it was Steve Jobs' last words were like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." Like
Yeah.
whatever
Oh
he
gosh, I
saw,
got chills.
me
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
And like whatever
Yeah.
he saw at those last moments was like beautiful. And there's a child who said, "Okay, I have to go, Mom. The train's here." Right?
Oh wow.
So like a
Yeah.
train came for him. So I think that what we experience as we pass is like as unique as how we live. But it definitely is something that brings us comfort, that brings us, um, yeah. So I love that feeling. That story about the dogs running around is just like something I'm going to carry with me forever because, when I used to do paranormal investigation, totally switching to a different tone here for a second, but
Yeah.
it was always like it was always the animals that gave the tip off to the family that there was like something going on. I remember seeing Bender too. I mean, my house is always surrounded in angels, right? Like it has been since I had KJ, and I would see Bender's eyes like follow something like across the room.
Wow. Yeah.
Like when you talk about like the veil being like what we call like the veil being quite thin between animals and the world, like one of the philosophies that I've believed is that the animals can see the world of spirit almost as easily as they see us. Like the veil is just
Hmm.
not there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if they can't see it, they sense it, right? So, I mean, animals are reading energy constantly.
Mhm.
So they're attuning to our energy, and they absorb a lot of our energies. They try to sometimes transmute our energy, for us into that unconditional love. They all have different purposes with that, and a lot of the times if an animal has, a lot of physical internal issues, it's because they're actually trying to heal a lot of their person's energy. And you can go in and help their body release it easier so that it doesn't cause that sickness, but that's their purpose. Like they're always going to do it. And people will be like, "Why, I feel guilty. I don't want them to do that." I'm like, well, that's what you two signed up to do here together. And this is what this animal's doing for you. And it's their purpose. And you take that purpose away, they're going to feel lost, right? They have to have a purpose. But yeah, they really are reading our energy constantly, whether it's and all energy in the environment, they're and that's why they respond so instinctually in the moment, right? They're not overthinking it. They're just like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm picking up.
Yeah. I remember
The same way with animals. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But the same way with animals, like reading our expression, uh, dogs especially, constantly reading people's emotional, like on their face, their expression, and they know what we're feeling way before we do, almost all of the time.
Yeah. I had a roommate, one of my best friends, she had this dog forever. And anytime she would start crying, the dog would look at her and like go to another room.
Oh gosh.
So
I
funny.
can't take it.
Like looking at her like, "What's wrong with you?" Like I'm gonna
Oh my goodness. No, my dogs all come flocking to me. Then all four will be, mom's not right.
we used to laugh so hard. We're like, your dog's like the anti-compassion dog. And I think about what you're just saying, and it was funny when I say funny, like completely, it's not funny, but in November 2018, I was at the lowest I think I've ever been in my life. Like I was being like psychologically abused at work. It was like the most toxic workplace in the world. And I ended up having an anxiety attack and I was hospitalized from it. Like it was like really bad. And I remember I was like on
Wow.
day 3 being home. I had to stay home for 3 to 6 months, the doctor said. Like I couldn't do readings, I couldn't do I couldn't even grocery shop. Like my heart was a heart monitor. Like it
Oh
was
my
really severe.
goodness.
And I was on day
Wow.
3 of being home. And I looked at Bender and I was like, that cat's lost 10 pounds. And he did. And that's when I started taking him to the vet. It was like overnight. He lost like
Mhm.
10 pounds. And so you saying that to me, you know, of course I feel the guilt like you talk about, which I'm glad you said that, because I'm like, it was the exact same time that we found out that he had cancer and
Yeah,
he was like
cancer.
sick. And I was also the least healthy I've ever been in my life.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's beautiful. This is why I love these conversations, why I love having a podcast, because I get to talk to people like you where I'm like, all these things kind of click for me, but we did go on this big journey together, right?
Yeah,
A
for sure.
big
Yeah.
journey and he saw me through every big transition in my life. So
Mhm.
yeah, and so it's beautiful. I just think there's nothing that compares to the relationship between pet and owner.
That is the perfect example with what you shared, and bringing that back, and that will come through in session a lot of the time, where I'll pick up, like, did you go through something really physically, traumatic, or, where you had something, that you had to recover from, and because it will show up in their body as like the human's energy that they're trying to transmute and
Yeah.
absorb and move through them, because they literally and these relationships are so powerful, but as the animal gets older, it's harder on their body,
Mm-hmm.
right? They can't process energy as easily. So even if there's energy shifts in our world, which happens a lot, like eclipses and, these portals of energy where they're heightened, can be really physically hard on an animal's body who either has sickness, ailment, or senior, where their body's just not quite up. Their vital force, I call it vital force, like their life force energy is just not quite as up as it once was when they were younger. So it makes sense that as he got older, he was doing that for you. And that was like one of the most intense times in your life that you were sick. And then a lot of the times that energy does go into cancer, and cancer is just a really tricky energy to work with and in the body. But I think it's, I love that you did all of these other holistic modalities, because there's not just one way, right? I mean, my animals get chiropractic, they get massage, they get acupuncture if they're going through something, at various different phases in each of their lives. They've had like an injury, or, one of my dogs has had more health issues than, and it's funny because she works with my heart, you
Mm.
know, and when I'm grieving, she has a condition in her throat, and it will actually exacerbate it, because she's pulling in that heart. She's working with my grief for me, and she sleeps a lot more. She's, and some other symptoms might even be like a lot of aches and pains all of a sudden. If you see things like that in your animals, vomiting, uh, diarrhea, sort of lethargy. So it could be anxiety, and usually they're kind of on sudden onset, like what you said, Bender lost like 10 pounds, right?
Like
And I
overnight.
mean, that's a lot of weight for a cat, and so those are the signs to say, all right, this is where we need to get some energy healing, or, the acupuncture would be probably my most recommended, as far as like what people can do in between and to
Yeah.
help in the physical body, because it opens up the meridians in the body to allow that energy to move through,
Right. Yeah, I used a lot of angel healing. Like you were talking about angels earlier, like Archangel Ariel is the one who I
She
recognize.
connects with me so
Oh,
much.
good.
That's so
Yeah.
funny that you're saying that, because I'm like,
Let that be
I love,
validating for you.
no, very much so, because I don't really but hearing you say that, I'm like, okay, you're doing that with Bender too. That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Archangel Ariel's the one who we really call upon to help like animals, right? And I mean, I was just praying my hands off to her as Bender was passing. And yeah, it was yeah, and so that's who I wouldn't be surprised is working through you when it comes to like this animal stuff. Like people who work with children have like Metatron all around them because
Hmm.
he's the one who helps with children, right? So
Oh yeah, that's really
yeah.
cool. I mean, I just hear the name Ariel, and she comes through a lot with a very warm purple, like healing frequency of energy. But I also have guides that I work with regularly, as well, which can be really fun. Then I kind of work with some pretty, like, some galactic, beings as well, which is kind of far out there. And at first was thinking, what is this, and like, what are you doing, Ray? Because I'm such a practical person. I'm very grounded. And none of this made sense when I had the hardest time coming out to the world, you know, that I'm an animal communicator. I heal energy, and, or it's not me, I'm holding space for guides to do this, right? But that I can do this, you know, and I see so much. So, you know, actually the healing that you'll have around you and your business, you know, is going to be much more that way. It's just like a transmission of this space that I'm kind of going to a meditative space, and I'm just speaking everything that I'm seeing there. It happens really, really fast. And it's all these other light beings that are kind of working to clear that out. And I think that's why it's so powerful, because when we as humans can take ourselves out of that picture and say, you know, yeah, I yeah, we can work with energy, and we can certainly help heal it, but we cannot do what these other beings are capable of doing. You know, it's just way too powerful that way. And yeah.
I love it. So what you just heard was Ray's doing a business clearing for me, and energetic clearing. So she does so much in her business, and I'm like, yes, let's do this. And I'm definitely going to come get like a pet communication with you as well. I'm really excited. I want to learn about this stuff more. I want to take your course when it launches. And I mean, the second we started talking about this course, I think quite a few months ago.
Yeah.
And, I was like, yeah,
I'm
I
a
mean,
little behind.
me and Christy will be signing up, but you just moved across the country. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
through so much in the past few months.
I know. I lost a dear friend, and it's been insane, but yeah, it's getting closer to time, and so much is getting ready to open up. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Well, Ray, this has been one of my favorite conversations. I have been so looking forward to this interview for so long because of all the questions I got to ask you, which I know are the questions that are churning in my
I
listener.
know, it starts opening up. It's like
Definitely. And at the end of this episode, I've given the listeners an opportunity to submit their own stories about how their pets communicate with them after they pass. I did one other episode where I had 7 people submit. So I know that like this episode's going to just be beautiful for the people on YouTube. Go check out the podcast version, because I'm going to add those stories from the listeners in there as well. And I'm just so excited to hear the feedback from this. So to kind of end it off, I would just love for you to maybe even just like give a tip if somebody wants to go look at their pet right now after listening to this. Like, what's one way that they can like start opening up to the even just like concept that they can communicate with their animals, and then how we can find out more about you and how people can work with you?
Okay. Number one tip, I say always breathe in their energy through your heart. Imagine your heart center being this sort of like wide open channel. Okay. And you can do this if you're traveling too, and you have to leave your pet at home. If you want to connect with a pet in spirit, an animal in spirit, I call them animals, not pets, but anyway, sorry. So if you want to connect with an animal in spirit, you can do the same thing. Just imagine their essence, which is like their energy, who they are at their highest vibration, like when they're really in their element, feeling good, happy, playful, joyful. And imagine that breathing in, like each breath you take in, just moving into the center of your heart, right? And sort of allowing it to fill up your heart and spread out around your body. And if you do that and you're present enough, and you do this for a couple of minutes, guaranteed you'll feel something. I don't know many people that don't ever, but you have to get out of your head. You have to get out of your logical mind and just breathe in that feeling, and you will start to feel, even if it's just simply feeling more love, you know, that's still that connection there with the animal, because they are pure love. And it's so funny because Catcher's here, and we were talking about scanning the room. He literally just got up. There must be something moving around here, because he just got up. He's looking up at the ceiling. He's looking at, and he doesn't normally do that. So we must have somebody working through us right now.
Ariel's here.
Yeah. Oh no, he's laying back down. He's like, it's okay, you know.
Anytime you hear me like talk slower, like I usually talk super lightning speed, is like usually angel energy is very much around, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I just feel like in the clouds, like definitely angel energies around.
Elated. Yeah. And then
Honestly, yeah.
finding out more about me, I mean, I'm in the process of really revamping a lot of what I do, but I'm putting more offerings out there. But I do have a monthly group call. I go over the energy for the month. It's always the first Monday of every month. And I do a group healing, and the energy that I go through is intuitive and astrological. So I kind of combine both. And then at the end, we do a really lovely group healing. And those are really low cost, $25. It's for everybody. So the more that can come, the more that we can connect and feel that the group healing energy is really powerful and amazing. And then my website is radiantvibes.com, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well. I do soul alignment for people, and I have extended energy healing packages and so much other good stuff for the animals. And yeah.
I love that. And I'll have links to everywhere you can connect with Rae, her membership, her website, her Instagram, her Facebook in the notes below. So everyone will just be able to click with ease. And, you know, I don't invite people onto the podcast I don't think are amazing. And I can vouch for Rae. I've had sessions with her. I will continue to have sessions with her.
You're
Real
making
deal.
me
So
smile.
yeah. So definitely
You're
check her
so
out.
amazing.
Yeah, and I'm excited to share you with the initiation circles. Well, my dad's actually going to come to that class because he is definitely an animal communicator without a doubt. He's like, do you think I need it? I was like, well, I think you would love to hear what Rae has to say. So he's going to hop onto the class too.
I'm really excited. Yeah,
But
that's going to be a lot of
my
fun.
dad is my go-to for everything when it comes to pets. Like I don't have I get heebie-jeebies with everything. He's like doing her ears for me, and he dealt with her abscess, and he dealt with benders, like shots. Like he's just the most compassionate, loving.
You can hold space. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm excited to share you with my dad too.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to be a lot of fun for me because I love teaching. I do love to teach animal community. I love to teach people to open up their connection with, like no matter what it is, just like their connection with their intuition and being able to expand into that, because I do think that we all have that ability.
Mhm.
Truly, I do. Where that hones in, like some of us have more of a defined niche in that and some are broader, like I think you're pretty broad with what your gifts are. You have a lot of gifts, a lot
Thank
of things
you.
that you can tap into. It's pretty cool. So,
I'm great at
oh,
Canva presentations. I
you
love
are.
that.
And you do podcast course teaching now too. So I'm like,
I know.
which I'm
Whenever
gonna,
people ask me something like, "Can you do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that. Like, let's do it, right?"
yeah.
Like, what do
Well,
you
I'm doing it
need to
tomorrow
do?
with you. I'm like, cool, great. Danielle's there. I know her. I love her. So great. I'm doing it. So, well,
Awesome.
thank you so much. I love this. I feel like we could probably keep going all day. And it's been so amazing to be here with you. And I feel so gracious and flattered and, to even be here and on this call with you and be in your community.
Thank you very much. All right. Thanks, Rae.